Hey, my name is Anita Matta, and I am so excited to be here speaking today. I'm really excited because we have had to reschedule this talk about 4 times due to various people in my family being sick. So to actually make it here, yes, I'm very happy to do that. I have been coming to Substance for about 4 years. My husband, Akram, and I started coming soon after my youngest daughter was born. I have 2 daughters, and they are 7 and 4, and they are both very dramatic and quite hilarious, which if anyone follows me on social media, you have seen some evidence of that. I am talking today about weakness. And as you can see, I am in a wheelchair. So either I'm very dedicated to this illustration or else I'm actually qualified to talk about weakness. And spoiler alert, it's the first one. I don't have the money to throw thousands of dollars on illustrations. If we're doing illustrations, it would probably be like a flannel graph, really old school kind of stuff. But weakness is not a topic that a lot of people feel comfortable talking about. In fact, some of you hearing that we're going to be talking about weakness, there are a lot of feelings that come up just hearing the topic. And I just want to assure you, it's going to be okay. You can relax your shoulders, take a deep breath. We're going to be fine. When I talk about weakness, I'm not one of those people who's like, but really, it was just strength, but it was shown differently. I'm not a wheelchair person that's going to be in the Paralympics. I'm not like just a shockingly strong person who can't walk. I'm actually very weak. I don't use the wheelchair all the time. I can use a cane sometimes, and sometimes I can walk a little better. But I fall a lot. I'm very weak. And it doesn't just make me emotionally stronger either. I cry a lot, which is not a good thing because one of my many problems means that if I don't take my medication, I break out in hives and start wheezing when I cry because I'm like allergic to my tears. So the whole situation is just extreme weakness, and it is not a fun thing. It is not fun to deal with. But it doesn't mean that my life is terrible, and it doesn't mean that my life is useless. And that's what I am here to talk about. When I was young, I was born with this genetic condition that is what has me in the wheelchair today. But when I was a kid, it didn't manifest in weakness. It manifested in pain. And I had always had pain, and so I just thought that was normal, but I was very strong. My parents were missionaries in Belize, and I grew up hiking through the jungle. I'd go with my dad. We'd hike like 20 miles in one day. To go to some of the back villages that we were working with. I swam in the rivers. I built things. My favorite toy was a machete that I would use to just chop trails through the jungle. Before you go crazy, yes, it was safe. If it wasn't safe, it wouldn't have come in a child's size, right? But my kids don't have one. But anyway, it was not until I was an adult that I started experiencing weakness. Throughout my whole childhood, my teen years, my early adulthood, I was very strong and I was smart and I could do things. And if there's one thing that growing up in the jungle teaches you is that the weak get eaten. Like, you want to be strong. You do not want to get left behind. You want to be strong and do the things and keep moving. And I thought that's how life operated. The strong win, the weak get left behind. And I graduated from high school early. We had moved to the States by that time. I went to college, graduated as a nurse before I even turned 20. And that was just my entire approach to life. If I want something, I do it. I can take it. I am a person who gets what I want. And then suddenly I couldn't anymore. It wasn't sudden weakness. There was a definite change, but my body just wasn't responding like it should. And gradually I just started being able to do less and less. And doctors didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know what was wrong. But it was really a crisis point for me personally, because everything that I had hinged my identity on, everything that I'd hinged my Christianity on, being able to do things for God, being able to go to the places that other people don't want to go, it was all doing things for God. And I felt like when I couldn't do those things anymore, that I was useless, I was weak, I couldn't accomplish anything, and therefore, why was I even here? And it really turned into a crisis of faith for me. So when that happened, I talked to people around me, and I felt like I just wasn't getting any answers that made me feel any better. So I turned to the Bible, which is a great choice if you're going through a spiritual crisis. It's good to listen to what other people say. I mean, I'm glad you're listening to me today. But ultimately, go to the Bible and see what God has to say about the topic that you're struggling with. Because sometimes you might be surprised by what you find. I was surprised by what I found about weakness. The whole way through the Bible, weakness was not mentioned as a bad thing. Now, I want to clarify here, when I say weakness, I hear many people talk about weakness when they're referring to sin, moral failing, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a physical, emotional, mental limitation, something that keeps you from doing things easily. If you're out there murdering people, that's not a weakness, that's a sin, you need to quit. But when it talks about weakness, it talks about God in Psalms, it talks about him being our shepherd. It talks about how God will gently lead the sheep who are pregnant, those who have extra difficulties. Anyone who is weak, the stronger people were assigned to take care of them. They were never told to look down on the weak. It was always take care of them. And then I started looking for more illustrations. And what really surprised me was when I looked at the life of Jesus. And I was looking at it, and I was just really stunned by the way that God chose to send Jesus into the world. Because, okay, let's imagine for a moment here that we are in a meeting. I'm a branding consultant, and Team Trinity up in heaven, we're taking some theological liberties here, so just bear with me. We're deciding, how are we going to send Jesus to the world? How are we going to convince the world that this is the Savior? This is the one who is coming to save his people, the promised Messiah. He should be born a king. He should come in. I mean, we've got anything. We're capable of anything. We could borrow a helicopter from the 21st century and helicopter him in. Like, that would be impressive. My personal favorite idea, bring him in on a glowing chariot pulled by flaming unicorns. Like, just come in from the sky. If you want to convince people of power, you need to impress them. But God, in all of his infinite wisdom, I mean, he's way smarter than we are. He's way more powerful than we are. He took all of that and he said, I am going to put that power into an embryo the size of a sesame seed and let it grow inside a woman, a young woman, who is now going to have to convince her fiance that she got pregnant, but she hasn't cheated on him. That does not seem very impressive. That does not feel like a way to convince the world of power. If Mary would have had one of those weird pregnancy apps that always compares the size of your growing child to food items for some reason, it's like, Mary, now your baby is the size of a blueberry. Incidentally, blueberries are full of antioxidants, and they are great for pregnant women to eat. I'm always a little weirded out by that. But the baby grew. It's the size of a pineapple. As Jesus grew inside Mary, Mary's life didn't get better. It didn't get more impressive. Jesus grew into a baby inside, like all babies. He had vernix, chubby little rolls, that baby fuzz that gives them all a little glow. And when it came time for him to enter the world, he didn't come into the world in a place of power. Like, as far as we can tell, it was just Mary and Joseph, and the baby slid into the world covered in amniotic fluid, pooping on himself, and desperately needing his mother for nourishment. And if Joseph was anything like my own Middle Eastern husband, he was probably freaking out a little bit in this situation. So, isn't that off-brand for Savior of the world to come as an infant? Doesn't that feel like we don't look at a baby and think, wow, that is power. We look at a baby and we think, wow, he needs me. Any mother in a crowd, like you hear a baby crying and the moms are all looking around to make sure somebody's taking care of the baby. Like, it is an automatic thing. We are wired to take care of babies because we know that they need us. We know that they are vulnerable and that anything can hurt them. Now, imagine God, the all-powerful, all-knowing God, choosing to come to earth as that tiny baby. And what does that mean? Why would he do that? Because he is also all-loving. And his goal was not to impress us. His goal was to love us and to be with us. One of the names of Jesus that was prophesied is Emmanuel, a God that is with us. And when you look at it from that angle, he came to be with us in our weakness. He came to be with us in our pain, in this world that he created, and then he put himself into it in a place where he could be attacked, he could be hurt, he could experience all of those things that we experience because he wanted to be with us. And looking through the rest of Jesus' life, like even as he grew up, he didn't look like the picture of power that people expected. The Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." He didn't ever say, "Blessed are the strong, for they shall take power." That's not where he was coming from. When we look at our lives, we see our weakness, and we see it as a bad thing usually. We don't see it as, this is meekness. This is me existing in vulnerability, in need of God. God came to exist in that space with us. We don't need to be strong to impact our world. We don't need physical strength to make an impact on others. We don't need to produce a lot of things to be valuable and to have value as God's children. It's not always an easy lesson. This is something that I have been learning over and over and over for many years now. And it's still hard for me. It's still a struggle. I mean, there are days when I can barely do anything. Today, after I do this, I'm probably going to go home and just sit there the rest of the afternoon till my kids get home from school. Watch TV, because this is about all I can do for the day. And the first time that I had really had a bad flare-up of my chronic illness, I remember laying in bed, and if any of you have ever had to spend any amount of time in bed, you know it is boring. It is just terrible, especially if you're a person who likes to be active and likes to be out. And this was a long time ago, back when Netflix was like delivered to your house in a little red envelope. My children don't understand the timeline of life very well. They think it went dinosaurs, and then mom was born, and then mom existed in like this miserable space right after the dinosaurs until iPads were invented, and then life began. And so, I was laying in bed not too long after the dinosaurs had died, and I had finished all of my Netflix envelopes, my DVDs, and you had to wait like days. There wasn't binging seasons of stuff streaming. And I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do? And I felt like God said, you can serve others. You can bless other people. And I'm like, oh yeah, because I'm super blessed right now. This is a great thing to share with others. But I stopped and prayed about it, because you're supposed to consider things, at least if God tells you to do them. And I got some paper and I just started writing out notes. And every day I would write out a note to one friend, and I would pray for them. I'd write out a little prayer, put it in the mail. Give it to my mom to put in the mail, because I couldn't walk out to the mailbox. And I got so much feedback from that simple action of how much that blessed people. And it didn't take me being strong and going out and doing something for them. It was me lying in bed, writing a note. That's all it took. You too can be with others in their suffering. You don't have to wait for your happy ending for God to use you. You don't have to wait for everything to line up in your life before you are valuable and before your story matters. Right there in the middle of your story, God is with you. In the messy middle of everything, you don't have to have all of the answers before you matter and your story matters, and God is right there with you. So I just want to encourage everyone to go out or stay in and know that God is the one who is the powerful. He is the power, and he can exist in your weakness. Those two things can coexist simultaneously. And that is how God can show his power. When your weakness is at its worst, God's power is no less. He is still just as powerful as he ever has been. He created you, and he is with you right in this moment, in the middle of your story. Your story doesn't have to have an ending to it before it matters to God.